Bueno, buenas tardes, porque ya más tardes que días, y bienvenidos a todos y todas, y muchas gracias por acompañarnos hoy. Soy Ana Esclápez, la directora del área de formación de la Fundación UMH, es decir, del Centro de Idiomas. Como sabéis, hemos organizado esta charla junto a nuestros compañeros de Cambridge English para daros consejos para poder superar un examen de Cambridge. Recordad que tenemos cursos de preparación para los exámenes Cambridge y otro tipo de formación. Podéis encontrar toda la información en nuestra web y redes sociales Idiomas UMH. Os doy las gracias a todos y todas por asistir y os dejo con David Bradshaw, responsable senior de servicios de evaluación en Cambridge English.
Okay, first of all, checking the microphone, that's working. Second, particularly people here, I've spoken to some of you before. Do you mind if I take this off? Can you hear me okay with this on? I can take it off, thank you. I'll try not to sneeze on anybody or anything like that. But it does sound slightly less muffled if I don't have this on. Okay, it's great to be back with a real audience. I've spent the last 2 years talking to a screen. And in honor of this, I'm still wearing my Zoom shirt, but I have put some trousers on today. So, it's not something I've done very much in the last few years, but they still fit, which is great. Okay, this is... It's a bit of a bitty talk, this. Okay, we're going to talk about ideas about assessment, because that's my baby. I spend my days and nights talking about assessment. I dream of assessment. My wife is sick of assessment. So we're going to talk a little bit about assessment and about a little bit of theory. And then what I've sort of been asked to do is talk to you about what makes a good exam. And so I'm going to give you Cambridge's answer. It's not just Cambridge's answer, it's the answer of most exam boards, most groups of people who put together exams. For example, ALTE, which is the Association of Language Testers of Europe, which has different members who run different exams in different languages. For example, the Instituto Cervantes and the University of Salamanca are part of ALTE for Spanish, and obviously we're part of ALTE for English. So we're going to have a look at a little bit about, if not what makes a good exam, if you're thinking of taking an exam, if you're a student, what should you be looking for? Okay, what tells you that it's a quality exam? Okay, and what tells you that it isn't? And then I've got dead. That's a good start. Then we're going to have an option. Okay, I understand that some of you may have questions, particularly specifically about, I'm going to take this exam. What tip do you have, or what do you want to know? So at the end, I want to leave a few minutes for questions. If there are no questions and you want to know a little bit more about our exams, I can talk you through them. All right? I know that we've got different levels in the room. I'm about an A2. But if you find it difficult at any time, just do this. Okay? If you find that you need something explaining again, not necessarily linguistically, some of this is theory. So there might be a problem with the theory. I just don't get it. Explain that again in little words. Okay, so first of all, we're going to kick the machine. First of all, we're going to look at assessment for learning and assessment of learning, or the other way around. So a little bit of theory about assessment. Then we're going to have a look at what makes a good test, and we're going to look at something called VRIP, which I'll explain later. And then either we've got an overview of Cambridge exams. I'm going to ignore that perhaps and come to you for your questions. Okay? And if not, I'll just force you to listen to that. Okay, so assessment of learning and assessment for learning. When do you think that you are assessed as students? Most of you are students. What time of the school year or the university year do you associate with assessment? right now. Okay, for the cuatrimestres. Okay, so now and then what, June? May, June? So at the end of a session, yeah? Do you think about assessment during the course? Or is it just at the end? Okay. Right, well, let's have a look at this. Apologies, the pictures don't come out fantastically. But basically, you've got two photos. Those of you who are doing our B2 exam, the first, will recognize this structure. Okay, I'm going to give you two photographs, and I'd like you to talk about them for a minute. I'd like you to compare the photographs and say whatever. I used to be a speaking examiner. Okay, so here we've got two pictures. What do they have in common? You might not be able to distinguish the one at the bottom very well. The testing or tasting, what are they testing? They're tasting food, okay? But the situation is different, isn't it? Okay, girls at the top in a restaurant, they're enjoying the food. Guys at the bottom are the chefs, the cooks, the people who are preparing the food. But they're both tasting. So, are they assessing the same things? They're both testing, they're both assessing. Are they assessing the same thing? It could easily be the same food. They're both assessing the taste, aren't they? So technically they're both assessing the same things. Are they assessing in the same way? Okay, they're probably looking for different things within what they're tasting. And again, that's what is relevant. So there's probably different things are relevant to each one. One of the girls are probably overall taste, this tastes yummy. The chefs are saying this needs more salt. Okay, or just they're checking the whatever. And, you know, we could think about, I'm not going to sort of dwell on this, but we could think about, you know, how they decide what is relevant and what is not relevant. Okay? So again, you know, we've got this question, you know, the chefs are testing, maybe they're testing for individual ingredients, maybe they're testing for the balance of the flavors and so on. They'll adjust. Okay, the girls are usually giving a fairly overall opinion. This tastes good, this doesn't taste good. Okay, and they have a certain criteria for what is good and what is bad. You know, it tastes good. A chef will take your meal to pieces and say there's too much oregano, not enough salt, a little bit too much pepper. You've seen MasterChef, you know what it's all about. So we've got different criteria. Wait for it to come back. So we've got a traditional distinction which we usually make when we're teaching and when we're learning, and that is formative and summative assessment. Does that ring a bell? Yeah. So summative assessment is what you were saying at the end of the quadrimestre. You get a grade at the end of the session. Okay. Formative assessment is assessing during the process in order to help you to understand where you need to improve, to give you feedback. Okay? Now we usually show these as sort of opposite ends. They usually, it's a sort of dichotomy between formative and summative assessment. But if we think about it, you know, here we've got ongoing assessment guides what happens next, and then at the end of the day to give you a grade, if you like, for in your case. It's a judgment. Okay? Traditionally, we would say that when you get here to summative assessment, it's too late to change. You've done all the training, you've done all the studying, you've done all the work. In this case, you've done all the cooking. And you've only got the possibility of not a good mark or a bad mark. And sometimes you have a bad day or whatever, but you know. So that judgment can be seen as coming at the end, it's coming too late. But are they exclusive? I would say not. I think both of them feed into learning. Okay? And The reason that both of them fit into learning is this. It's what we call learning-oriented assessment. So assessment is always helping you with your learning. Always. Whenever it happens. And you can have assessment at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end. It will take different forms, but it's always, always, always going to feed into your learning. It's always going to tell you something. So, for example, the girls think, hey, we liked what they've cooked. We'll come and eat here again. And the chefs think, let's cook better so they'll like it. Okay? And that creates a circle. So, the girls are measuring what's already happening, but it's going to happen again, isn't it? Okay, because the chefs are back here tomorrow. They're going to cook the same things tomorrow. They need to learn and do it again better if possible. And so they're improving their learning because they want to improve. And the girls giving feedback are going to help that. Okay, so it becomes that cycle, that learning cycle. And I think we spend too long thinking about learning as a road or a pathway, this sort of straight thing out in front of us. And it's always cyclical. Okay, so for example, if you studied, you studied English when you were in school maybe, and when you were quite small you may have done the A2 exam. That doesn't mean you speak perfect English, but it gives you a milepost, and it tells you you're at A2, your next objective is B1. Where did you do well in A2? Where didn't you do well in A2? That will tell you what you need to work on for B1. When you get to B1, analyze. I did well in the speaking, I didn't do so well in the writing, I need to focus on writing. It's telling you something. Even if it's just a grade, the grade is telling you something. Okay, so that's the idea of learning-oriented assessment. We're now starting to call it integrated learning and assessment, which is even more together. The learning is really locked in with the assessment. It's teach, test, teach, test, teach, test, teach, test. Or sometimes test, teach. We can test to see what you already know, and then base our teaching on what you already know and what you need to know. Okay? This has lots of implications, and it has implications for everybody. In the classroom, God, that's horrible, isn't it? We do this too much on screens. On screens, it looks fine. On a screen here, it's a bit small. Apologies for that. So in the classroom, the assessment sets a milestone. It tells you where you're doing well and where you need help. It tells you that the screen's going to turn off again. And it helps you to focus the learning and refocus if you're getting a little bit lost. Okay? And it motivates you because you can see that you're progressing. And it challenges you where you feel that you need to improve. The teacher also gets it. It tells the teacher that they've taken the right decisions as part of the curriculum or part of the class planning. It also tells the teacher what to plan next. Okay, so if you're a teacher, you know that you're building on knowledge all the time. It shows you where you're going, where you as a teacher need to train more, because teachers need to train as well. The people who never stop learning. And it helps you diagnose A, how your class is doing, and B, how individual students are doing. And the learner exactly the same. It certifies achievement, because we can give a test, we can give a certificate. Okay, you can demonstrate your level. It opens doors, because once with that certificate you can do things. You can go on Erasmus, you can go to an oposición, you can, and then lots of things, graduate in some universities, where you have to have a B1 or a B2 to graduate. And it gives you motivation, because you've seen that step, you've seen improvement, so that helps you to improve. There's nothing worse than sitting there for weeks or months and not feeling that you're actually improving. So that the assessment, the constant assessment, will help you to improve. Okay, just to show you how we're building integrated learning and assessment, we may be running out of batteries, I think. Okay, so, that's a bit. It must be easy to integrate into a curriculum. It means it's an add-on. The curriculum should cover all of the skills, all the basic abilities that you need. And then the exam is testing the skills and basic abilities that you're learning, the functions that you need, okay? So that makes it easy to integrate into a curriculum. And if you need to add some testing, test and train, or a test book, or a couple of practice tests at the end, just so that you can see what the shape of the exam is, learn the timing and things like that. Widely recognized. There's no point in doing an exam and then taking your certificate along to the Erasmus people and saying, hey, I did this. You know, Academia Pepis has certified my level of English. And they say from Erasmus, muy bien. We don't recognize Academia Pepis. We probably should, but they haven't asked. So you can't use it. It has to be recognized for what you want to use it for. So if you, before you take a test, if you're taking a test for a specific reason, check with the people who you're going to be presenting the test to. Make sure they recognize it. And make sure what they recognize. Because not everybody recognizes the same thing. Obviously, a test should be motivating. Everybody has their own version of motivation. And it should be related to real life. It should be based on real life functions. There's no point in doing an exam. For example, when I came to Spain, I'd been studying, I came to Spain on I was before Erasmus, but it was basically an Erasmus. I was a lector in a couple of institutos in Santiago de Compostela. And I sat down one day and I realized I didn't know the word for fork. I'd been studying Spanish for 8 years and I didn't know the word for fork. I had to lean over to somebody in the bar and, excuse me, what's this? And I thought, oh, obviously he's English. They don't have those in England, probably. Like we don't have fridges and things. You know. But it was really weird. I'd learnt Spanish. I'd read El Quijote by that stage, but I didn't know the word for fork. How functional is that? It's a silly example, but there are so many where you have to learn, you know. So it has to be related to real life. The V for VRIP, validity. And validity means, are we testing what we say we're testing? Simple as that. Okay, there are all sorts of nuances, all sorts of types of validity, but the basis of validity is this exam says it tests English. Is it testing English? Or is something else there which gets in the way? And I've got an example here of one of our early attempts. So here, for example, would anybody like to answer one of these? Nice essay questions for you. I'm sure you can all do those. Which one would you choose, A, B, C, or D? So we've got the effect of political movements upon 19th century literature in England. Chuppy. Elizabethan travel and discovery. Excellent. The Indian Mutiny, always a popular one. And the development of local self-government. I think you're probably right. It's probably the only one that we could have a go at, isn't it? I have to say, mea culpa, this was the exam question for the 1913 Cambridge Proficiency exam, the Certificate of Proficiency in English. Now, obviously, 1913, they're a lot closer to the 19th century, so they could probably have a better go. But this was an essay question. The validity question here is that if you don't know anything about the subject or the topic, however good you can write English, you can't answer the question. Okay, so we're not testing your English necessarily. We're testing your knowledge of the Indian Mutiny. Now, bear in mind the people who were taking proficiency in 1913 were people who were non-native teachers. Horrible term, non-native. We're trying not to use it. But these were non-native teachers who wanted to teach in schools in the what was the empire back in the good old days. Okay, so they wanted to teach in a school in the empire. So some of them may have been Indian, from the Indian subcontinent. So they would have known about the Indian Mutiny. So there, you know, there is a logic there. Okay, what about this one? Is this testing speaking? In this part of the test, wait for it to come back, you have to read aloud 6 sentences which appear on the screen. So you have to read aloud, this is the latest version of the plan. Okay, just reading aloud. Is that testing speaking? Could be testing something, some parts. If that was the only part of the test, it would be a poor test. But it is pronunciation, intonation, elision, and so on. So it is it's producing something. What about this one? This one is for younger students. They're given 4 pictures and they have to tell a story. They have to tell the story to the teacher. The teacher gives an introduction on the first picture and then they have to continue the story. Is that testing speaking? Yeah, do you agree with that? Very quiet over there. I'm conscious I'm sort of teaching over here, but please feel free to join in. So I don't want to throw shadows here. It's testing speaking. It's testing other aspects of speaking. What about this last one? This is for first or advanced. You've got a question in the middle, 5 different aspects, and as a pair or as a 3, you have to talk together. You can see I was a speaking examiner, no? As soon as I say talk together, the hands go, because that's what you do. You say talk together and discuss the different aspects for 2 minutes. Okay, is that testing speaking? Again, different aspects, okay? So that leads us to the question, what is speaking? Production or reproduction of language, the first exercise, yeah? The pronunciation exercise, just speaking, just saying something, reading aloud. It's a very basic form, but we get a lot out of it. Then we've got the monologue, telling the story. And we've got interaction, which we could say is another skill. That's where we're speaking together. Okay, and we can test all of those. A good test would put all of that together. Okay? So validity, we test the use of English, and this isn't the use of English section, it's all the way through the exam. We test using English in real life situations. And we tap into the brain and how the brain works in those situations, even though we know we're in an artificial situation, even though we know we're in a test. And then I've put in some technical terms there just to remind me, because I always forget what they are. Okay, we're looking at authenticity of language. And tests have shown actually hooking people up to PET scans and things when they're doing these things, checking the activity in the brain. We know that when somebody is doing, for example, a speaking task where they're talking together and trying to reach a conclusion, even though they know they are not in a real life situation, the areas in the brain which light up are exactly the same areas in the brain as if they were doing it for real. Okay, so if, for example, we set up a situation where they have to ask for directions to the railway station, they know they're sitting in an exam room, but their brain functions in exactly the same way as if they were wandering around asking for directions to the railway station. Okay, that's what we mean by authenticity. Situational authenticity is that you're in the real situation. And that is replaced in an exam, in an artificial situation, by interactional authenticity, where the interaction is the same. So the interaction is real, even though the situation is false. Okay, so when you're in a role play situation, you're actually working, your brain is working in the same way as if you were in the real situation. Okay, that's how we achieve validity. Okay, the next thing is reliability. An exam has to be reliable. And by reliable, we mean, can we trust the accuracy of the marks? Not just the accuracy of the marks when you take the exam. Because remember, our exams, for example, are taken every week, practically. somebody is taking a Cambridge exam. And your certificate has to be equally valid and equally acceptable. So it has to show the same level. So if you took the exam now, if you took the exam in 2 weeks' time, and you took the exam last September, I should be able to say, if you've got 159, and you got 159, and you got 159, you are showing exactly the same level, even though the tests you've taken are different. Okay? Quite often when we're teaching, as teachers, we measure, sometimes we get a group of students and think, oh, that exam was a bit hard for this group of students. I may have used exactly the same exam with my students last year and they did very well. This year I'm going to have to mark them a little bit better. Even though the exam's the same, I can't then compare your exam this year with the exam that somebody did last year because it's been marked in a different way. Okay, so how do we achieve reliability? You've all got pieces of paper. I'd like you to write, and I remember I haven't got my glasses on, so you need to write it nice and big. I'd just like you to have a look at this apple, and I would like you all to grade this apple from 1 to 6. Okay, 1 being the lowest, 6 being the highest. You have 10 seconds to think, then I'd like you to write on your pad in nice big, I say nice big letters, but it's not a letter, a nice big number. Okay, so just hold it up. So 10 seconds to think and to write your answer. And then to hold it up nice and high. Grade this apple. Hold it up. Right, I can't see anything here. Okay, so we've got 6 here, 6 here, 5. Interesting, a 3. A 4 here. I was going to say it's an 8. It's a 3. 5, there's always 1. 5, we've got a 3 here, lots of 3s. Can't read that one. What is it? A 4. And a 2. Thank you. Technology. Brilliant. But I can actually read that one, which I can't read the others, so thank you. That's good. Yeah, you're probably all right. But you probably all use different criteria. Now, if we had time, I'd ask you to explain to your partners what criteria you used. But I haven't established any criteria to grade this, have I? So you've all done what you want. Some of you might like red apples. Some of you like green apples. Some of you might like very big apples like this one. Some of you like the little ones. I can't have a reliable mark if I haven't established the criteria, can I? So we need to set a reasonable set of criteria. And that's what we do. You haven't got a hope in hell's chance of reading this. But this is what we give to our speaking examiners. This is for B2. All of our speaking examiners are given the same rubric. And they're trained to use it, which is also a good trick. Okay, so we've got here across the top, we've got grammar and vocabulary, discourse management, pronunciation, interactive communication. Discourse management, how you organize your ideas into a coherent text, how you put the sentences together. Interactive communication, how you work together, both with your partner and with the examiner. So it's tested all the way through. Okay? And we train our examiners to use this so they all know what a 5 looks like. They all know what a 3 looks like. We all know what a 1 looks like. We know how to share between a 3 and a 3 and a 4 or a 2 and a 3. Okay? I used to train speaking examiners. To train a speaking examiner to do first, they had to do at least a 4.5-hour training session for one level. Learning about how to manipulate the material, but also learning about the marking. Watching videos which have been graded by expert examiners and explaining this person got a 3 because they did this, this, and this, but they didn't do this. Okay? Only with that sort of training or that sort of coordination between examiners will you get reliability. Okay? So that's how we achieve reliability. Again, reliability for us based on solid research. We have a lot of research. We were actually in at the beginning of the Common European Framework. We were in ALTE before the Common European Framework was written. We helped to develop what ALTE used before the Common European Framework existed, which is the ALTE levels. The ALTE has a set of levels as well. We have a network of trained examiners, and examiners are trained every year. You don't do the training once and then you go off and do what you want. Every year at the start of the examining season, you have to do what they call certification. You have to go back and do the exams, watch the videos again, different videos, mark them, etc. Okay? And we monitor them. We go in and watch them examining to make sure they're doing it right and make sure they're marking correctly. The same is done, exactly the same is done for writing examiners. Impact. I said I was going to talk about impact later. We can have micro impact, which is in the classroom and in the school, and we can have macro impact for the wider society. Okay, but impact is sometimes called washback. It is how the exams affect the way we teach, how the exams affect the curriculum, how the exams affect all sorts of things. Okay, and we aim to have a positive impact, and it's designed into the exam. Okay, so impact of Cambridge exams, impact on the progress of English. You know where you're going, and you know what you need to do to achieve it because you know what's in the next exam. Okay, it shows you your strengths and weaknesses. When we give you a certificate, we don't just give you a mark, pass, fail. We give you a mark for each skill, so you can see where you've done well and where you've done badly. Remember that cycle of learning. It feeds into classroom and assessment practice. We've been doing exams for the Comunidad de Madrid since about 2010, and every year the students take one of our exams in sexto and cuarto de eso. And studies have shown that teaching in those schools has actually changed over the years because they're aiming for our exams. And teaching has changed by saying we're going to do more speaking. We're going to introduce language assistants. We're going to do more listening. Rather than the traditional grammar, hammer, 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 we're going to do more functional language. We're going to work on different aspects, and that is feeding into, it's the exam feeding back into the classroom and possibly improving what's being done in the classroom. It's teaching to the test, but if the test is well designed, teaching to the test often isn't a bad idea. It also helps teacher motivation. Teachers are motivated because their students do well in the exams, and they have a clear aim to go for when they're working. They're not just sort of floating around teaching English. They've got to do this and this and this. And learner motivation. Learners see that progress. Okay? The last one, P, practicality. You can have the best exam in the world, but if it takes 6 days to take and costs €3,000, you're not going to sell very many of them. It's not practical. We talked about the first proficiency exam. First proficiency exam took 12.5 hours. Are you ready to do an exam in 12.5 hours? Probably not. One nodding here in the front, thank you. Yes, there's always somebody who gets excited about exams, like me. But no, normally we wouldn't accept to do an exam for 12.5 hours these days. It has to be practical, it has to fit into our lives. And it has to be easy to mark, and it has to be whatever. Okay, so practicality is very important. If the test is practical to produce, administer, and take, is the test practical to produce, administer, take, and provide results for? Okay, and practicality changes, and we need to change with it. So we're looking at exams getting shorter. We're looking at waiting time for results getting shorter. We're looking at people signing on to exams later, maybe 2 weeks before the exam, for example. We're looking at being able to deliver an exam by internet on a computer screen rather than on paper, so we don't have to send paper backwards and forwards. Massive carbon footprint, chopping down millions of trees, etc., etc. It's easier to do it on a computer screen. Okay, so lots and lots of things which are changing in practicality. And really, that's going to stop now. Yeah, it's not going to work. I'm going to go over here. So, ideally, okay, yeah, it's just arranca de vez en cuando mal. Ideally, this is the balance. Okay, so we have to give equal weight to validity, reliability, impact, and practicality. Doesn't always come out like this. Okay, sometimes in order to make an exam more valid, we have to make it slightly less practical. There's a payoff. If we want to make an exam really short, it's very practical, but maybe it's not quite so valid because it's not testing everything. Okay? And if we want to make an exam practical, we may find that the marking suffers and isn't quite as reliable. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with that because we have exams which can be compared with an exam 10 years ago. It has to be the same. So, in a nutshell, lovely English expression, a test should measure the correct things. It has to be valid for the purpose. Validity isn't absolute. It has to be valid for what you're using it for. Okay? It has to measure consistently and accurately, and it has to be comparable across different versions of the exam, therefore reliable. It has to have a positive impact, both on teaching, on learning, and in the wider context. And it has to be practical enough to produce and to use. Okay? And here, I've got a section here about exams, but I think it's probably better if you have any worries, doubts, questions, existential angst about any exams which you are planning to take, or any questions or rumors that you've heard that you want to clear up. I'm free to, hopefully, to answer them. If there are any difficult questions, I have Alan here, which is always good. He gets the difficult ones. So, are any of you actually preparing our exams at the moment? C1, yeah? You're doing as well, yeah? B2, yeah? Is there anything that you want to know about those exams? Anything that you maybe your best friend's mate's girlfriend's brother told you was about the exams and you're not sure whether it's true or not? You can get the rubrics. They're published. If you came by the table earlier, you'll have seen we had the booklets of it for each exam. We don't have any of those left, but if you go to our website, you can find the handbook for teachers for each level of each exam. And in those, you'll find the rubrics for writing and the rubric for speaking. Okay, and there is an explanation of some of the terms. There's a glossary which explains what some of the things mean, because we use some specialized vocabulary. Okay, so exactly what the examiner takes into the exam, you have a copy there, so you can see what you're being examined on. Always remember, and this is where, if any teachers are listening, this is where things are different normally. Our exams are not designed to start at 10 and work down. So we don't take marks off when you get something wrong. What we do for the writing and the speaking in particular, what we do is give credit for what you do. If you read the rubrics, and I'm sorry you can't read it on here, but if you read the rubric, it is all positively phrased. It's all can do this, can do that. You never lose points. That's the trick. You're measured on a scale, and the scale says is intelligible or is mostly intelligible, and the examiner is trained to know what mostly intelligible at C1 means. It doesn't mean very good for C1. Intelligible means that they can understand you. You may still have a Spanish accent, but as long as they can understand you, and we can't say native speaker now, a proficient speaker of English can hear you and understand you, you are intelligible. It doesn't matter, you may have a Spanish accent. I have a giddy accent when I speak Spanish, but hopefully most of the time I'm intelligible. Usually I'm unintelligible when it comes to my sense of humor, because I do funny things with language because I like playing with language. And then a lot of people say, no, you've got it wrong. You mean this. I say, no, I was playing with it. Forget it. Yeah, I got it wrong. But yeah, I mean, the rubrics are there. Read them, and we're trained never to test you, never to mark you against something which is not on the rubric. And nowhere does it say he missed the third person singular S. Take him outside and shoot him. Doesn't say that. You can go all the way through, and you can still drop a third person S in proficiency. You probably won't get a 5, but you can still do it. Okay, because you can still understand what's being written. Okay, when we talk about errors, we talk about impeding and non-impeding errors. An impeding error is a mistake which actually stops you from understanding what's being said. A non-impeding error is a mistake which, yes, it's a mistake, it's not correct English, but I can still understand what you said. Okay, and we balance those. So non-impeding errors can be accepted quite a way up. Even in C1, you can get away with the odd non-impeding error. You should be reasonably accurate by then, but they're not specifically going to take half a mark off for each one. Okay, read the rubrics, and you'll understand me. You'll understand me better. We're always looking for how to give you points. We're like Father Christmas, or los Reyes Católicos, los Reyes Magos, los otros Reyes. Reyes Católicos didn't give many presents, I don't think. But the Reyes Magos do. We're looking to give you all the time. He did this, brilliant, we'll give him a mark. He did this, better, put the mark up. Didn't do this, oh, well, but I'm not taking a mark off. Okay? Yeah. That depends on how you've taken the exam and which exam you've taken. If you take an exam on paper, it will normally take between 6 and 9 weeks for us to get the mark back to you. Nearly always, it will be 6 weeks. Okay, we have a rule that 95% of the results have to be ready at the beginning of the window. So that's 6 weeks after the exam. And those 3 weeks are then for the other 5%, which sometimes we've got a difficulty, or the exam has arrived in Cambridge late or whatever. If you take the exam on a computer, what we call a computer-based test, first of all, you can make the entry much later. You can make an entry up to, I think it's 10 days before the exam, whereas normally you have to make an entry 5 or 6 weeks before the exam for a paper-based exam, and you get the results in 2 weeks. Okay? And we have other exams where you can sign on much later, and you get the results in 48 hours. But that's a different sort of exam. Okay, if we're talking about qualifications, 6 to 9 weeks for paper-based, 2 weeks for computer-based. And you get a link to a website where you can access it with a code, and you can download your statement of result. It'll then take longer to get your certificate, but you can have your result with your statement of result in 6 weeks normally. Anything else? Yeah. that could even be A2 for some people. These exams are designed not to rely on somebody living in the country. You can be in Spain your whole life, and you can reach a C2, and you can get an A at C2, which is even beyond C2. It's not a prerequisite. Obviously, some people will find it more difficult if they're not living in the country to reach that level of proficiency. But there are ways now, and we've explored them particularly during the pandemic, where we can contact people without moving from our homes. So you don't have to go to Canada or the States or the UK or Ireland. You can contact people through the internet. But it's not designed that you have to go and live in a country. It helps sometimes, but you don't have to. Oh, no, we couldn't possibly do that. I imagine, we're selling exams all the way around the world. Imagine somebody from Malawi or somebody from Bangladesh. They're probably very bad examples because they could do English. Actually, they could say that their English is part of their language anyway. But there are lots of places in the world where people would not be able, financially, because of time, possibly even because of visas, they may not be able to go to an English-speaking country. We can't preclude people taking our exams because they can't go to live in the States. Or that would be very, very, very wrong, I think, on many different levels. Okay, and it does help. And my Spanish has improved immensely since I've lived in Spain. But I have a degree in Spanish, which I studied before I lived in Spain. Or part of it I studied before I lived in Spain, at least. Okay. Anything else? Okay. One thing I'll mention, which some of you have already mentioned to understand. This is a website which allows you to access all of the free resources which we have really well hidden on our website. So we've created this here in Spain. It's called Cambridge para ti, cambridgeparati.es, and this gives you access to all of the resources which we have on the Cambridge Assessment English website and also on the Cambridge University Press website. They're joining together at the moment. Okay, and you can filter it. So if you're a student and you want material which just to practice on your own, go in as a student, and you can filter by level, by skill, and by time. So if you want a 5-minute activity while you're waiting for the bus, you can go in here, choose a C1 listening task, and you can do it in 5 minutes. Okay, and it corrects itself, so you don't have to go to a teacher and get it corrected. It's all self-contained. If you're a teacher, I'm not sure if many of you are teachers, but if you're a teacher, go in as a teacher and you'll find all of the material here, but also some specific material for class. So some stuff, classroom, class plans, lesson plans, material that you can use, and everything is there. Okay, everything you need. So you've got the PDFs, which you can photocopy. You've got links to the videos if you need it. You've got links to the audios. You've got links to everything you need. The only thing it won't do is make the photocopies for you. Sorry. But you can send it to your students as a PDF, and they can print it themselves if they need to. And if you've got younger students, then there's a section here for families, where you've got games and karaoke's and various things for young children. Okay, so that's quite useful if you've got, maybe you're giving classes particulares to sort of little kids. That's got some interesting stuff there. Okay, so that's just really, really handy. You can get it in Spanish, you can get it in Portuguese, you can't get it in English because it was produced here. They now want to copy it in the UK, but there you go. Anything else? Well, in that case, thank you very much for coming along. I hope it's been at least slightly useful. And again, if you have any questions, come on. Well, those are Alan and myself. But if you've really got any questions, visite nuestro bar. As I say, if there are any difficult questions, to Alan. The really, the real stinkers, yeah. The ones he has to sort of spend ages preparing for. As I say, your first point of contact, the team in the Centro de Idiomas, always your first point of contact. They're nicer than we are anyway, so